What's good? It's Woog. Naoya Inoue, the monster, just stopped TJ Doheny. I know some people are going to say Doheny. I will defer to the British commentators in his earlier fights. TJ Doheny in the 7th round. And no, this wasn't Naoya Inoue's most impressive performance. He did look like he was struggling a bit on the boxing side in the first 3 rounds. I know some will say that he was just working on some things. Some will say that he was carrying TJ Doheny. I think that's a little disrespectful to the efforts that Doheny put up here. But this was a fight that had interesting early rounds because you saw how the southpaw Doheny was able to kind of set traps. He was able to move around pretty well. He was able to defend pretty well against the rather patient Naoya Inoue and his offensive attack when he was letting some punches go. So Doheny would be moving around the ring. And Doheny, by the way, he's got a lot of craft. I know he's not one of the fighters that people want to see Inoue fight. Like, this is not Nonito Donaire. He didn't hold 2 belts like Marlon Tapales after Tapales upset MJ Akhmadaliev. This certainly wasn't Stephen Fulton. Remember how excited people were to see Inoue versus Fulton before Inoue blew Fulton out? And this wasn't Luis Neri, but TJ Doheny, I mean, he's fought some good opponents. And I mean, some might not even know, but he was an IBF 122-pound belt holder back in 2018, and he had a successful title defense. Now, his losses came to Daniel Roman. That's the guy who beat him and took his title. A couple fights later, Doheny lost an 8-rounder to a lesser-known fighter, and then he fought and lost to Michael Conlon. That was TJ Doheny moving up to featherweight to fight for an interim WBA 126-pound title status. Again, he lost to Michael Conlon there via unanimous decision, and then 2 fights later, this is 2023, so very recently, he fought Sam Goodman, who some people do want to see Naoya Inoue fight because Sam Goodman defeated up-and-comer Rais Aleem. A lot of people thought Rais Aleem was going to beat Sam Goodman, and Sam Goodman's won a few fights since, so he might be the next guy we see Naoya Inoue fight if they could get that fight together. But Sam Goodman beat TJ Doheny in March of 2023 via unanimous decision. So Doheny has fought some good fighters and he's pretty crafty. He's a southpaw. And again, as Inoue was patiently pursuing him, you saw the movement and the feinting kind of throwing Inoue's rhythm off where he couldn't really time Doheny in a way where he could let his most effective punches go and land those punches cleanly. On the other hand, I thought Doheny was catching Inoue with some of those looping left hands and some of those 2-punch combinations. So he would move, and then he would ambush with like 2, sometimes 3 punches at a time. Now, sometimes Inoue had a hand up and was catching a lot of the power shots, but I would say Doheny might have won 2 out of the first 3 rounds, and even the 4th round was very competitive, where Doheny might have edged that one as well. Now, I thought that Inoue started to come on pretty strong towards the end of the 4th round. You saw him start to let his hands go more often. You started to see him throw those power shots where you hear the thump, right? So even if Doheny blocks or partially blocks some of these shots, you see Doheny start to get back into the ropes more often and then get back on the movement. You also started seeing Inoue go to the body a lot more towards the end of the 4th round. So I thought that the 4th round was kind of tough to score. 5th round, you started seeing Inoue pour it on more. Yes, Doheny was still catching him with some of those looping shots and was still having some good moments where he was landing some effective punches, but you started seeing Inoue get more comfortable letting his power punches go. So I thought Inoue won the 5th round. And then the 6th round is the interesting one because Inoue wins this round and he starts putting a beating on TJ Doheny. Yes, Doheny's still landing some good punches here and there, but in the last 10 to 12 seconds, Inoue starts to open up, just an onslaught. And, you know, Doheny starts looking like he's hurt and he starts moving against the ropes and he's just kind of sitting there. Now, you don't want to just be sitting there against a puncher as devastating as the monster Inoue, but Inoue starts letting his hands go, and the last punch of that round, after he just starts opening up on Doheny, that last punch was, I believe, a left hand that catches Doheny like in the back area. Yes, it was close to that liver area, but it was closer, I thought, a little bit closer to the spine. Not to say that it was foul play, but he was letting his hands go, and you started seeing Doheny start to duck down, move around. He was in a lot of discomfort. He was in a lot of distress. So Inoue's letting his hands go. The bell sounds, and if you watch that last punch that landed, as soon as it landed and they start to walk back to their respective corners, you saw Doheny put his glove to his back and kind of look like he was stretching it out. I was wondering, okay, was that like a liver shot that hurt him, that kind of momentarily compromised him? So they go back to the corners, they come back out. Inoue starts opening up again, high and low, and he starts throwing right hands to the body. You start seeing Doheny kind of double over against the ropes like this. And then he kind of takes like an awkward step, and then he kind of appeals to the ref as he grabs his side like, no, I'm not right. I'm not right. He starts walking around, and then he kind of starts limping badly. The ref calls the fight off. So it's technically a TKO, even if it wasn't, a win via spectacular fashion, like many people who wake up early in the morning on these Tuesdays or Wednesdays to tune in to Naoya Inoue expect to see sometimes. Like, this wasn't the beatdown that Inoue applied to Stephen Fulton. This wasn't Inoue smoking Nonito Donaire in their rematch, defeating him, knocking him out in the second round. This was, again, a fight where Inoue looked like he started having to make adjustments because of what Doheny, with the feints, with the left hand, with the awkward style, the movement, and tricky timing. This didn't appear to be a walk in the park for Naoya Inoue. And when he did close the show, it to me looked like it was a byproduct of that last punch that landed in the backish, liver-ish area at the close of the 6th round. Nonetheless, this was ruled a TKO 7th round for Naoya Inoue. He continues to be on this tear, stopping his last several opponents. The last person to go the distance with him was Nonito Donaire in November of 2019 in one of the fights of the year. So the monster hasn't been taking the distance since before COVID started. So again, this wasn't the most impressive performance, but I thought that, Inoue was blocking a lot of shots. I thought that his defense was pretty good. I am wondering whether the difficulties that we saw him having were genuine, if they were authentic, or if they were in a way working on some things. I tend to think that this was a legitimate tricky test, and I don't know if Inoue was as up for this fight as he has been in some of his fights in the past against a Nonito Donaire, against a Stephen Fulton, but I still think that he was truly having some difficulty with the boxing of Doheny. But you started to see the pendulum swing. You started seeing momentum start to mount on Inoue's side. Again, I would say late in the 4th round, and then in the 5th and 6th round, he started having his way more and more. And you started seeing Doheny look like he was having problems with Inoue's power and Inoue's volume, because Inoue started, it started sounding like fireworks, like or like a bag of popcorn popping in the microwave, where it's like, and you're watching this like, this can't be a part of Doheny's plan. I thought that the 37-year-old started to slow down, and again, Inoue started to take control even before that injury that we saw in the early 7th round, which again, I thought actually happened late in the 6th round. So Naoya Inoue retains his undisputed 122-pound status, and the question is, who does he fight next? So is it going to be Sam Goodman? Bob Arum, after the fight, said that he wants Inoue to fight one more time in Tokyo at the end of the year, and then he wants to bring him to the United States to fight in America in 2025. So I'm wondering, is this going to be Junto Nakatani, the guy who's just wreaking havoc at 118, who I expect at some point is going to fight Naoya Inoue's brother, maybe Takuma Inoue? But Junto Nakatani's been looking magnificent. He's a taller fighter. He's very rangy. He's a very hard hitter. He finished his last opponent to the body. He also throws a lot of feints. So if Inoue's having some difficulty with these feints, I think Junto Nakatani can give him some real problems. So Junto Nakatani, yeah, I see some people putting Junto Nakatani in their top 10 pound for pound right now. He had one of the knockouts of the year in 2023 against Andrew Maloney. His last 2 wins came against pretty good fighters. Astrolabio knocked him out in the 1st round, and before that, Alexandro Santiago, who beat Nonito Donaire. Junto Nakatani stopped him in the 6th round. So I'm wondering if Nakatani, who only has one belt right now, he just has a WBC belt at 118. He only recently went to 118. He's only had 2 fights there. So, I mean, is he going to clean house there and start unifying some of the titles? Or is he going to just jump up to 122 to fight the monster? I tend to think that he's going to just stick around at 118, even though, again, he's a very tall fighter for the division. So maybe his body naturally lends itself to 122 instead of 118. But if they are going to do Inoue versus Nakatani, you would think that they would rather do that in Tokyo than to do that in the United States. It doesn't make any sense to bring that to the US because both of these guys are from Japan. So if Inoue has one more fight in December of this year and it's going to be in Japan, is that going to be Inoue versus Nakatani? If it's not, we'll see who they put him in against. But when he comes to the States, supposedly in 2025, what does he do? Does he go up to 126? If he does, who's he going to fight? I don't think he's going to fight like Angelo Leo. I don't see like the fanfare or luster there. I don't think he's going to fight Rafael Espinoza, that nearly 6-footer at 126. Now there's Brandon Figueroa, who I like watching at 126. If you were to ask me to rank the 126 guys, like I was asked in a recent live chat, I think I put Brandon Figueroa at the top of my 126 stack. But there's also Robeisy Ramirez. And, you know, being that Robeisy Ramirez is on Top Rank and he was a belt holder, that one would have made sense. But since Robeisy Ramirez lost to Espinoza and Espinoza doesn't have the same, not that Robeisy Ramirez was like a huge name, but you could tell he was kind of the star that they had been building up for a while on Top Rank. I feel like Ramirez would have made more sense than Espinoza. It's not going to be Luis Lopez, who just lost and got knocked out by Angelo Leo. I mean, we haven't seen Lee Wood in a while, but maybe Lee Wood is down for that one. I know he had dropped his belt and said he was going to move up to 130 or something, but he hasn't fought since. And I mean, I don't know if he could still make 126, but Lee Wood is, I think, a big enough name for that to be interesting. But again, he's been relatively inactive in the last several months. I don't think it's going to be WBC champ Ray Vargas that Naoya Inoue goes up in weight to fight. Would it be Nick Ball, who just beat Raymond Ford? Maybe, but I don't know. So the 126 one is kind of tricky because there's no obvious name for Naoya Inoue to move up and test himself against. Now, if it's just about collecting a belt, maybe he could, you know, fight an Angelo Leo or something just to say he won a belt in yet another division. But if it's not a jump to 126 in his next 2 fights, then what's that US fight going to be? Is that going to be the Sam Goodman fight? Or the wild card here is if Bam Rodriguez, who is currently at 115, goes to 118 for maybe a fight or 2 and then jumps to 122. To me, that sounds like it's a bit much. Now, I think that Bam Rodriguez could put on weight. It seems like his body's about to start putting on some weight. This is me just kind of observing how I think he's looking between fights. But you're talking about a 2-division jump to fight the monster. I mean, talk about perhaps biting off more than you could chew. I mean, Bam Rodriguez just decimated Juan Estrada, so maybe they run that back. But if Bam Rodriguez has ambitions of moving up 1 or even 2 divisions, that's kind of like an outside wild card, kind of a dark horse here in who Naoya Inoue's future opponent in his next couple of fights might be. I tend to think that it's not going to be Bam in the next 2. So stay tuned. We'll see how this all goes. But it sounds like, again, according to Bob Arum, that it's going to be one more fight in Japan at the end of this year and then a fight in the US sometime probably in the first half of 2025. But yeah, let me know your thoughts on Naoya Inoue versus TJ Doheny. Were you impressed by this performance? Did you think that the monster was having some difficulty here, or did you think that he was just working on some things? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Like the video, subscribe to the channel if you are into the fight talk. I'm Woog. Thanks for tuning in.